Good afternoon, everybody. We want to welcome y'all to our second virtual story time with the Scholar Network. And today we have a very special guest. We would like to introduce Dr. Artika Tyner. Y'all say hello to Dr. Artika Tyner. Say hi.
Hello. Excited to be with each of you today and share about my book.
All right. As you guys know, my name is Anthony Doman. I'm the co-founder of the Scholar Network, and it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Artika Tyner. So she is the author of the book Amazing Africa A to Z, and she also has she's going to be reading that aloud, and she also has a special presentation presenting the beautiful country of Ghana and her trip there and everything that she's been doing there. It's been amazing. If you guys have any questions that you want to ask the author, please type them in the chat box and she'll be more than happy to answer. All right, so everybody kick back, relax, and enjoy the fun and engaging time of learning. And remember to tune in every Saturday at 2:30 p.m. EST for more virtual story times. So please welcome Dr. Artika Tyner, and you can introduce yourself and tell everybody.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you for the warm welcome. But I have to start by thanking your team for starting the Scholar Network. I know one of the things that's very important to me is literacy and diversity in books. And what inspired me to become a children's book author was my own personal experience. And one, as we think about Teacher Appreciation Week, a special thank you to all of our teachers, because we know that they've invested in us and planted seeds in our lives so we could be the best that we can be and reach our dream. So as I think about my role as an educator and teacher, I would have been remiss of not spending some time focusing on literacy and education, especially because a part of my work is as a civil rights attorney. And one of the greatest challenges that we see in looking at the impact of mass incarceration, the impact on it is in particular related to communities of color, is to seeing a link between illiteracy and future incarceration. So now it's our time to break that cycle and to be able to not only create an opportunity to read and love books, but an opportunity to appreciate our cultural heritage and build our community. So without further ado, I'll start with that special presentation. I had to start here because it lays the foundation of why I decided to do this work. And this particular presentation, I know many of us have received or heard the information about 2019 being declared the year of return by President Otto of Ghana. And one of the things that we were able to do with my co-author, which her name is Monica Habia, we were able to use that as an opportunity to promote not only our book, but the reality of it was to promote education, knowledge, and a sense of culture and pride. In fact, we were able to take this presentation throughout our community to help elevate and raise awareness about our history and letting our history be a source of pride. So the title of the presentation is I Am, I Was, and I Will Be. And that inspiration is from the one and only Octavia Butler. Now, I learned about Octavia Butler when I was in college. I took a class on women in science fiction. And what I loved about Octavia Butler is that she helped us to imagine a world where we could create and make sure that equity, inclusion, strong communities, healthy communities would be a reality. And if you haven't read any of her books, I highly encourage you to start with either Kindred or The Parable of the Sowers to take a look at the deep history that she brings in through science fiction. Now, for me and for parents and educators, and even for the children who are listening, why is this important? Because we tend to read things that we're only interested in. I had no idea even what science fiction was, but it opened a whole new lens of new books to read and a new perspective and really unleashed my imagination in a way that I use it today on imagining the world that we want to live in and taking the steps to create it. So hence, I am, I was, I will be. So here's our short presentation. And so when we look at this specifically, it's an opportunity to help bridge knowledge, to help end the knowledge gap. So the first question, how many countries are in Africa? There are 54. Now, most people, we've traveled all over the world with this presentation and to help shed light on some of the issues and understanding the African diaspora. Most people can't answer that question. So if you could answer that first question, you got a plus on your report card. So as an educator, I'm always thinking about report cards. So 1+, 1 check mark for you. And making that key distinction that Africa is a continent and not a country. So as you can see in the example and map that we use of Africa, you can see the magnitude, the size, to give you a sense of what it looks like for all 54 of those countries in the continent. Which country will replace the US as the third most populous nation? Any guesses out there? Anthony, I'll call on you. Which country in Africa do you think? Any wild guesses?
Ghana.
Ghana, oh, you're close. You're in the West. It's actually Nigeria. So as we look at that, we also see that there are demographic shifts. And also, if we think about where the fastest trends in population growth as a whole across the world, it's in the continent of Africa. So which continent has the highest proportion of entrepreneurs in the world, some of the highest growth rates? Africa. So we can answer that question. So when we look at the year of return, in particular, this is important. As you look at the picture, there's a few things that you may notice. You first notice the black star, which represents the power of the African diaspora, of the African continent, of our people, of the unity. And then you also have the tagline or motto of Ghana, which is freedom and justice. And you see AD that it was established, Ghana as an independent nation, no longer as a colonized nation, in 1957. So this particular photo is a group of us who went back for the year of return in front of the black star. Why Ghana? Why is Ghana important? Here's just a few brief facts, but one of the things that CNN announced in 2019, that Ghana is one of the top 5 destinations to visit. And also, if we think about Ghana, Ghana was important and served a very significant role in inspiring the fight against colonialism and colonial rule across the continent. And also, as we look at one of the pieces of the history of slavery and colonization, we know that there are some key places that you can visit while in Ghana, including the slave castles in Cape Coast and Elmina. So why the year of return? What do we need to know about the year of return in Ghana? In 2013, the UN declared 2015 through 2024 the decade for people of African descent. And I encourage you to please visit the UN website to learn more about this. There are also, especially for my college-age students, parents, and other adults, there are fellowship opportunities to help unite people of the African diaspora to learn and grow together and develop a strategic plan for our futures. And if we look specifically the last 2 pieces, this one in particular, the second bullet point, is highlighting that the U.S. also acknowledged, this is House Bill 1242, acknowledging the 400 years of African American history, commission and committee to be able to bring forth work in elevating the story, but really the history of the year of return and the opportunity and the invitation of Africa really being acknowledged as a birthright to return back home, to have that Sankofa moment. And how many of you know about Sankofa, really the reality of looking at that Adikra symbol, knowing that we're looking back, but we're also looking forward. And there's just a couple people that I'm going to highlight briefly. The first one being Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, who is the first prime minister and president of Ghana. So he led the fight for independence from the British. And he also was a strong advocate as it relates to Pan-Africanism, advocating for one Africa united around the world. So one of the things you'll see in this, I'm sorry?
No, I said it was somebody different than Nelson Mandela.
Yes. There are plenty of leaders that we have to know about and that we can get some inspiration to encourage us for the work that we must forge ahead. So excellent point, Anthony. And when we look at this specifically, I hope that you can see in this photo, there's just something that I want to pause on. So who are some of the folks who visited Ghana? Some of the folks that we know based upon our history is Dr. Maya Angelou, who lived and worked in Ghana as well. And she also was able to host a special visitor and a special guest. I'll let you pause and kind of guess who it was, but it was Malcolm X. And in this particular picture, it's of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And in fact, Dr. King was so inspired by his visit to Ghana and for the fight for independence for African nations that he even penned a special sermon, which is called A Birth of a New Nation. And I'm just going to read it here just to make sure we all have it and take a look and can internalize it. He said, Ghana reminds us that freedom never comes on a silver platter. It's never easy. Ghana reminds us of that. You better get ready to go to prison. When I looked out and saw the prime minister there with his prison cap on that night, that reminded me of the fact that freedom never comes easy. It comes through hard labor and it comes through toil. It comes through hours of despair and disappointment. So some words of encouragement from Dr. Martin Luther King about the power of being able to engage in strategic action in the struggle for justice. Next up, I know many of us know his name, Dr. W Eb Dubois or Dr. W Eb Dubois. We know him as a great scholar who coined, for instance, the soul of Black folks, which still reads true today, of looking at the reality of the experience of African Americans in America and the injustices that we're still fighting in 2020. But one of the things that a lot of folks don't know about him, and myself included until I traveled to Ghana, was how significant his work was in Ghana. In fact, he is buried in Ghana, and there's a W Eb Dubois Center where you can go and learn more about his life, read some of his books, and also get a chance to see all of the materials that influenced him in books that led him to write what is now known as the encyclopedia called Africana. And this quote really inspires me in thinking about Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. Oftentimes when we think about our personal identity, and especially of those of us who were not formally born in Africa, but how do we strategically build our connection in meaningful ways? I must admit, for me personally, until I traveled to Ghana, I don't feel that I fully knew myself. And not fully knowing myself allowed me to not fully appreciate myself and to know my value. So one of the things that Ghana taught me was to love myself, love everything from my hair to my skin to my country, my background. Who am I? My community in Rondo. Where did I come from? So it gave me a sense of that my country, that I had a second home in Ghana. I remember I was walking down Oxford Street one night. I was going out just buying a couple things and just strolling along. It's a great place. It's bustling with a lot of activity, a lot of very powerful artisans who have all types of clothes and handcrafted musical instruments. Anything you like that is beautifully created, you can find on Oxford Street. And I remember, so I was walking there in Ghana, and one gentleman said, "Where are you from?" And I tried to explain to him that my grandparents were from Mississippi, my other set of grandparents were from Alabama, and then we migrated north and we moved to Minnesota in a community called Rondo. And he cut me short and he said, "Hold on, sister, welcome home." And I must admit that that was one of the most powerful moments of my life, that I spent so much time trying to figure out how to explain who I was. And in one moment, he gave me an invitation that I will keep forever of welcome home, that you're a part of us, you're a part of me. And it's that essence that they talk about in South Africa called Ubuntu, that a person is a person through others. And for the children, I encourage you to write it down, Ubuntu, U-B-U-N-T-U. And the next piece is, I was. So this also gives us a sense of our cultural history, and knowing the beginning well, the end won't trouble you. So knowing who we are puts us in a certain place and space to appreciate the type of endurance, the type of legacy that's naturally in our DNA. And that brings me to something that I had not seen until my visit last year during the year of return. It's the Monso River. And I don't know if you know anything about it, but let me pause and give you just a brief history lesson related to the Monso River. Now, this place is identified as the last bath. And I have to tell you, it's a deeply sobering journey. You can see the group on my far left walking through and walking to the place where there's a small river. And in that river, that was the place where people took one of their final baths before entering into the slave castles. And when you think about it, a bath, you have Calgon, Take Me Away. We put fresh lavender and we put all these things in our bath water, fresh essential oils. But this is just a river. And the worst part of it was, in many instances, the slave masters, the colonizers also used it as an opportunity to inflict even more pain. Could you imagine someone also scrubbing and cleaning you with bamboo? So it's basically cutting your skin and causing more abrasions and just causing your skin to bleed for no reason at all, beyond just offering more torture, more pain to an already difficult and inhumane situation. So the last bath, I must admit that we were filled with many tears as we walked down that journey to the river. But I can tell you there is a powerful message of hope, because as you look down in the river and look a little more closely, one thing that you will find is that our ancestors could see is little glimmers of gold, as a reminder of who we are, and a reminder of our homeland, and just a reminder, despite all of these things, that there was something magical there. I was resilient. I also just included a photo of Cape Coast. I highly recommend you can watch the video with your family on CNN. President Obama and his family visited Cape Coast, and there's a wonderful video featuring their tour. And I also want to make sure that you read this piece in everlasting memory. It reads, of the anguish of our ancestors, may those who died rest in peace. May those who return find their roots. May humanity never again perpetuate such injustice against humanity. We, the living, vow to uphold this. So really our own personal pledge related to ensuring that these experiences will not continue, even still yet today. Another piece of I was, oftentimes we talk about our culture and our heritage, but I was also gives us a sense of the history around courage. And one of the places that we often travel to is the Kwame Kingdom. And you can see us in the picture here with the king. And one of the things that has stood out to me, you can see in the picture behind the couple that are there on the far left, that's Mr. Nathaniel Kalik and Miss Victoria Davis. The Kalik family, they represent the legacy of courage here, even in our Twin Cities community. They've served as key leaders in the NAACP. So I made sure that I had this picture of them with this powerful image in the background, because when we think about courage, one of the things that the Kwames were able to do is to overtake one of the slave forts. And as you can see in the pictures, they're holding the keys. The young man is holding the keys. Why is this important? Because oftentimes the only stories that we hear related to slavery are stories of defeat, but there also were stories of victory. So the Akwamus are known as the conquerors of all conquerors, because wherever they were, and even if they were captured and stolen into slavery, they actively resisted. The next piece is kind of thinking about the hope for the future. This part gives us a sense of who we are as well. It's the I will be. So that piece of Octavia Butler's work really focusing on the future of possibilities and who we could be. And so it's a source of inspiration for our youth. So this particular quote is from Dr. Kofi Annan, and he said, any society that does not succeed in tapping into the energy and creativity of its youth will be left behind. And hence why I love the work with the Scholar Network of ensuring that education is at the forefront of our minds and fostering opportunities like we have today to learn something new. And in addition, we're going to go back to, remember I talked about Dr. W Eb Debois. You can see this is our group in front of his home. And one of the things that is listed here is just one of his quotes. It's a quote of inspiration to remind us to believe in the future and to remain hopeful while taking action to build the type of world that we want to live in. So we're standing in that legacy as a group and standing in his shoes, because literally Dr. W Eb Dubois dedicated his life to the liberation of our people across the diaspora. He wrote all the way into his final days, well into his 90s, because he wanted to document our history and to give our history in a historically accurate way. And here's one additional piece that I want to make sure I share. There's another connection of someone that I want the families to research and learn more about, Marcus Garvey. And Marcus Garvey, there is the Marcus Garvey House, which is dedicated to the people of the diaspora. And one of the things that we want to be reminded of, I know we see the quotes that we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. I think this quote here on this particular slide are a reminder just of that. So he said, no one knows when the hour of Africa's redemption cometh. It's in the wind. One day like a storm it will be here. And when that day comes, all Africa will stand together. So that's the unity, once again, that I described around the Black. Special guest when she was in Ghana, Africa. And one of the things that he was able to do is help to connect the dots, that the challenges faced through the civil rights community also had a connection to the human rights and the challenges that were happening around the world. And one thing that stood out to him in this first quote, he was welcomed back. And the quote reminds us that when he was in Nigeria, one of the things that he was told was, this child has come home. So one of the things that the year return reminds us of is that we have a home to go to, and we must return to be able to find our roots, to appreciate who we are, and to be able to celebrate our shared humanity. And this one I want to highlight, especially for the children. I encourage you to take a look, and you can do a Google search, maybe a short homework assignment I encourage you to look up the African ancestral wall, and you can see it here. So I Will Be is a 4 dozen profiles. So one of the assignments that your family can take on is maybe you'll take some time, learn about Ya Asantewaa. Who is she? What is her legacy? So you can take some time, learn about Zinga, learn about all these people who helped to create a legacy for who we are today, help to lead change, and can serve as an inspiration for us to hand-painted portraits give honor and salute the leaders who helped to lay the foundation for our futures. And last but not least, I know she's included in the African ancestral wall, is Harriet Tubman. So when I think about her, conclusion. Told her and gave her the courage. So if you haven't watched the movie Harriet yet, I highly recommend that as a great family movie. And if you're going to watch it, one of the things that I would think about on how to turn this into a learning experience, ask your children about some of the leadership qualities that Harriet Tubman lived out. What were the characteristics? How did she lead? And how did her faith play a role in who she was and the work that she was able to do? To be that word that's listed here on the screen, unstoppable. So I'll pause here and I'll transition now directly to the book. And why did I start with the presentation? Because the presentation helped to lay the foundation of why I decided to write the book. That the book was really an answer to a question that I constantly had. Where are you from? Was the first one, and what represents home for you. But more importantly, if we look at the data, only about 10% of books are written by authors of color. In addition, nearly only about 10% of books have a main character of color. So we were doing something monumental here to be able to change the discourse in children's literature to ensure that it reflected our culture and our history in a positive, uplifting, and inspiring way. So instead of spending all my time and answering the question of where are you from, make sure that you tell me more about the country of Africa versus, we all know, the continent of Africa. I decided to write a book. And so this book I wrote with my co-author, Monica Habia. So now I'll take a chance to read it and share with you, page by page, Amazing Africa, A to Z.
All right, let's get into it. We want to thank you first for that great presentation and like that amazing like background. A lot of us don't know nothing about that. We don't know nothing about Ghana. We don't know any history about anything having to do with Africa in itself. We're obviously very ignorant to it. We want to thank you for that because that's important, even just for kids. And for kids, like even if you didn't understand all of that, just make sure that you just internalize that this is where all your roots are coming from. This is where everything started. This is where you lie. And whether that means you're white, black, Hispanic, everything starts in Africa. And it's great just to know, just to understand where you come from, who you are, and how you're going to go about your life after knowing that. So you can go on with your book. And
yes, Anthony, that reminds us of Marcus Garvey because he warns us what happens to a tree without roots. So it all starts with the roots and knowledge of yourself. So I think that's a perfect transition as we go into the book. So I talked about this one already. That's A is for Amazing Africa, and there are 54 countries in the continent of Africa. B, I know oftentimes when I was growing up, I didn't have any real images of Africa, but B is for beaches. And I remember when my friends started showing me some of the pictures of some of the beaches in Freetown, Sierra Leone. And so I had to put that in the book of beaches, the sun glistening of the white sand of the beaches of Freetown, Sierra Leone. C is for Children of Africa. So children, one of the fun things that I was able to do at one of the schools we visited was play ampe. So children play ampe, love to dance, and enjoy singing. So we have an image of children here. Deserts. Deserts are windy and sandy. There are 3 deserts in Africa, the Sahara, Namib, and Kalahari. And once again, a great experience of if you want to create a research assignment for your children, make sure you take a look at the 3 deserts that we listed here. Education. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. That's from Nelson Mandela, who was the president of South Africa. In Africa, students study and train to become doctors, lawyers, engineers, entrepreneurs, writers, and world leaders. F. F is for food, which reflects the rich culture of Africa. Most foods are grain, vegetable, meat, and fish-based. Fufu and gari are popular in the West Africa regions and mostly eaten with soup or sauce. Ugali, jollof rice, akara, sambosa, and suya are all very tasteful African foods to try. So one of the things that I always love when we arrive, we have one of our dear friends, he makes sure that he hosts a house party for us in his backyard, and we have all of these foods. So that's one of my highlights of enjoying the rich flavors and experience of food. Greatness. Greatness resides in Africa. Great men and women have come before us and continue to exist in Africa, and because of them, Africa can stand tall in the world. Nelson Mandela is South Africa's first Black president. Kwame Nkrumah was the first president of Ghana, and Kofi Annan is a former United Nations Secretary General. In Africa, great women are leaders like Ya Santiwa, the Queen Mother of Ajusu of the Ashanti Kingdom, and Madam Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, the president of Liberia and the first elected female president in Africa. And I also have to highlight, as we're going through, our illustrator, Rihanna Ismail of Ray of Light, was able to really capture a good glimpse of Africa by bringing in the intricacies of color, of culture, of patterns. So I also want to take a moment just to applaud her, because truly the words on the page would not come alive without the intricacy of her artwork. Hospitality. Africans believe no one is an island, rather everyone is a part of the community. Harambe, a Swahili word which means pulling together or friendship, is the motto of the country Kenya. Akwaba, which means you are welcome in Ghana, and Jambo, which means hello, are all words and phrases to express the power of community. Next up is I for independence. Many African countries were colonized by European countries. So remember, I talked about Ghana being colonized by the British. This means that African countries had to fight to be free and independent of these countries. J is for Johannesburg. It's a beautiful city in South Africa. Like many parts of the world, Africa has beautiful cities too. Some of them are the Cape Town of South Africa, Nairobi of Kenya, Lagos of Nigeria, Accra of Ghana, Kigali of Rwanda. And I want to pause here just for a moment for Kigali. I encourage you to take a look at some pictures of Kigali. It has been ranked as one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And Dar es Salaam of Tanzania. Next up, we have K. K is for Kilimanjaro. Mount Kilimanjaro is the tallest mountain in Tanzania at 19,340 feet. There are other breathtaking mountains such as Mount Kenya, Mount Speke, and Baker in Uganda. And then L. L is for languages. There are over 1,000 languages spoken throughout Africa. It is very common for Africans to speak 2 or more languages. And this one's M. This one brings a smile to my face. M is for Mama Africa. Mama Africa is her name. Her claim to fame is being the Earth's oldest populated area. And Anthony just mentioned that we have the beginning of the roots of the world in Africa. Civilization began in Africa. Africa is the second largest continent in the world. N is for nature. Nature is Africa, and Africa is nature. Aside from the rivers and mountains, Africa boasts of unique mammals, birds, reptiles, fish, insects, and plants. Okay, so we have O, Ukua. So it's a currency in Mauritania. As a dollar equates to America, the Naira is to Nigeria, and CD is to Ghana. So you get a clear sense of some of the currencies. Next up is Proverbs for P. Proverbs are wise sayings and form part of the African culture. Here's one in particular. Wisdom is like a baobab tree. No one individual can embrace it. So what does that mean when you think of that particular proverb? It gives us a sense that we are collectively stronger together by sharing our gifts and talents and insights to create wisdom. Quina is a city in Egypt. So we know, where do we find Egypt? We're going north to find Egypt in Africa. Resources for R. Resources are in abundance in Africa, most of them natural. Gold, petroleum, diamonds, cocoa beans, silver, bauxite are just a few of the many natural resources found on the continent. And I just have to go back here, rewind just for a moment. I think this is very important because once again, the images that I saw growing up as a child never gave a sense of Africa being full of resources. But for instance, if we use cocoa beans, we know that chocolate, we wouldn't have chocolate without the cocoa beans in Africa. So thinking about resources, the natural resources and the abundance thereof. S is for slavery. During the trans-Saharan and East African slave trades, strong and able men and women from Africa were sold into slavery. And T is for tribes. Tribes are largely spread across Africa and connect families, communities, and ethnic groups together. U is for uhuru. It's a Swahili word which means freedom or independence. For example, freedom and justice is Ghana's motto. So you see that I showed you the freedom and justice with the black star in our photo presentation. And U also stands for Ubuntu, which means I am because we are. V is for Victoria Falls. Victoria Falls is the world's largest waterfall and is located on the Zambezi River. So look at that, isn't that beautiful? W is for writers. The world celebrates great writers and Africa can boast of many, like Chinua Achebe of Nigeria. So I know many of you have read his book, but maybe read it again. Things Fall Apart. Also, Aye Achieve Arma of Ghana, another great writer. And next we have X. X is for Xhosa. Xhosa is the second largest ethnic group in South Africa after the Zulus. It is also one of the official languages of South Africa. So we're making our way. We have 2 more letters left. So Y. Y is for Yamoussoukro. It's the capital of Cote d'Ivoire, a country in West Africa with 22 million people. So it's a large country. Have you ever heard of Cote d'Ivoire? And last but not least is Z, Zambezi. Zambezi River is the 4th longest river in Africa. Lake Kariba is one of the biggest man-made lakes in the world. So here's a picture of the lake. And then here's a closer look. Here's our map of Africa. And remember, I talked about Egypt being in the north, so you can see Egypt. We also talked about Ethiopia. We have the western region that we had identified, some countries there of Liberia. Remember President Sirleaf Johnson? So take a look. And we also include a list of the countries of Africa from A to Z. So I highly encourage you as a family, create your A to Z list of all the countries. And then here are a couple other amazing facts about Africa. So Africa has the 2nd largest population in the world with over 1.2 billion people as of 2016. We have the longest river in Africa and the world is the River Nile. And then the Niger River is the 3rd longest river in Africa. And then here's one as well. Uganda is the only country in Africa which starts with the letter U, and Swahili is one of the languages spoken by Ugandans. So thank you. I hope that it was an exciting opportunity for you to learn about amazing Africa.
That was an amazing presentation. That was awesome. You did an awesome job, Dr. Tyner. We want to thank you again for having you present your book and everything. We just want to get into some questions that we had some viewers ask on the live. So,
Okay.
what is one takeaway that you want I'm sorry, we can get into your closing remarks. Let me get into that first. Anything you want to say, like why you wrote the book? What was the reason for you writing the book?
Yes, for me, writing the book was really an opportunity for me to even learn more about the continent. And in learning more about the continent was learning more about myself, about my identity. And it gave me even more aspirations because I knew even before starting this book project that one of my life's dreams was to make sure that I traveled throughout the entirety of the continent. So far I've traveled through South Africa multiple times, of course, Ghana and Tanzania. And my hope is to be able to, as we go on additional trips that I'm always placing at the forefront for my family and for the community, to visit, to explore, and learn about all the things that I talked about in Africa A to Z. And also, I will share with you my latest book project. It's called Kofi Loves Music. And it's one of the projects that I worked on specifically because my goal was to, as well, to showcase that, like Africa being the root of civilization, Africa is also the root of music. So this book gives an introduction to African musical instruments through a conversation with young Kofi and his grandfather. So if I think about all of my books, and I'll hold up some of the other ones as well, I use all of the books as an educational experience to help dispel some of the myths about our history, about our culture, where we've come from. But more importantly, to give people of color a source of pride, a source of identity, and for our children. Because our children, it's essential that we know who we are for our children's sake. So that way our children can't fall for any type of lie that someone would tell them. Now, if someone tried to give a child this idea that Africa is poor, and the only thing that we were taught when we were children from our news and media is Africa was poor, all you see was children with swollen bellies and flies on their head, they can talk about the beaches in Freetown. They can talk about leaders like Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. When someone says, well, who are the African leaders? They can give the narrative that helps to counter the negative narrative that we are fed each and every day. So they'll be able to tell, after reading Amazing Africa, the difference between fact and fiction.
Okay. All right. So now we get into those questions, and I definitely think that those books are amazing, and we'll let you advertise and tell you what to do. We're just getting right after these questions. So what is one takeaway you want the viewers to know about the Scholar Network?
I think one takeaway that I want folks to know is that learning is something that can happen any and everywhere. I was fortunate. I grew up with educators. My mother's an educator. So oftentimes, yes, we didn't have a lot of resources, but I was very grateful that my grandmother and my mother created educational experiences wherever we are. Because the reality was, how did I learn basic math? I learned basic math by helping my grandmother count her coins. How did I learn basic math? I learned it in the kitchen with counting and doing fractions, with measuring and creating, because my family created homemade breads. They created every item that we ate. So it was a surprise. Not until I made it to college, I didn't know that there was even a such thing as processed food, because we grew our own food and we created our own family traditions. So I would say the main takeaway that I love about the work that the Scholar Network is doing is that they're making information accessible and they're making learning fun and cool. Because oftentimes learning can be an afterthought. It feels like learning is school. But learning is everywhere, and our community is our school. Our churches are our schools. Wherever we are, there can be learning. So that would be my main takeaway, and especially in thinking about, I'm an adult and I'm still learning something every day. So learning is also a lifelong journey.
Okay. Next question is, how did visiting Africa and going to all these amazing places, how did that change your perception of being Black, and how did that make you feel? How was the experience? What did that do to you?
I think the experience empowered me and gave me life. If I think about my condition before I started traveling to Africa, I know we talk a lot about self-care and mental health and our physical health. I can tell you that the first time I went to Africa, what was amazing to me is I didn't have all the struggles of even some of my physical health conditions. I was like, wow, I feel healthy and strong. How was that? Because I was eating organic by default. I was eating healthy foods from Mother Nature and Mama Africa and every meal that I had. If I think about my mental health and self-care, I didn't have to go around explaining myself. I mean, I can go into the courthouse or I can go see my clients and people will treat me like I'm the defendant and that I'm not an attorney, and I have to validate myself constantly. Traveling and working in Africa, I didn't have to go through that same struggle. When I said, you know, I would like to work on something, or I'm an attorney, or I'm an educator, people believed me, took it at face value, and we could build things together. I guess we have to be fully transparent about some of the challenges, especially in America, around the impact of white supremacy and racism. And as we think about that, a part of my research that I'm starting to explore is how that impacts our health, wellness, and overall well-being. So if I think about Africa and the experience of traveling to Africa, it has been life-giving. When I'm in the Kwame Kingdom, I know that I'm a part of the community. I know that I have something to give. I feel strengthened. I feel empowered. When I'm in Accra, just I gave you that example, walking on Oxford Street, that I can be able to walk and be free without any impediments. So I would say, just in a general sense, Africa for me has been life-giving. And it also has given me a sense of my culture, my history, and my own personal mission. So that quote that I showed earlier about Harriet Tubman, definitely when I came back from Ghana, I was unstoppable.
Okay. So the next question is, what's one thing you wish kids knew about Africa?
I think the one thing that I wish that kids knew about Africa is that I wish they didn't know any of the things that they've learned before today, because I think a big piece of it are so many misconceptions. So if there's one thing that I want them to learn, seek it out. Aspire to go to Africa. Same way kids get excited about going to Disney World. Think about a country that you want to visit. And I say this because visiting Africa was on my vision board as an aspirational goal for many years. But when it came to fruition, that dream, it was like it was activated and came alive. So if there's one thing that I want children to know, is to forget every negative thing that you learned about Africa and to take a moment and search it out for yourself. Find a country that you want to visit. Find a language that you want to learn. Find a culture and heritage that you want to study about. Try a new food, make a new friend. I think a part of it is just our willingness to learn, our willingness to be connected, to find our shared humanity and common destiny.
That's a lot. I hope these kids can understand that. I hope you guys like internalize that. It may be a lot for you guys to get, because I know you guys are probably like 5, 6 years old, 7 years old, but take this information. It is so significant. And I think we have time for one more question. So what kind of things do kids in Africa, let me read it again. What kinds of things do kids in Africa learn in school? Is it similar or different to what kids in America learn?
That's an excellent question, because one of our last trips, we spent a significant amount of time in schools. So I would say overall, the learning process is very similar. But one of the things, remember I said L for languages? One of the things that I encourage parents to think about, encourage young people to think about, what was so amazing to me was to see the many languages that children learn, spoke both their mother languages. And in fact, for instance, Monica, I wish she was on the call with us, Monica speaks 5 different languages. So the ability to be multilingual, to be able to work, walk, play, and engage across cultures. I guess the other thing that I would say that was very significant to me about learning as well is the advancements in STEM. It was amazing to see young children, 5, 6 years old, coding. It was amazing to see young children gather together in learning spaces in the community, doing online tutorials on their phones, on computers. So this idea around learning is as natural and essential as breathing for the students that I met. So students are constantly learning, and really I applaud the educational system for embracing STEM in unique ways. That way technology can be used from everything for helping to test malaria, to helping to teaching key skills, whether it's typing skills or coding. So what I'm amazed to see each and every time, the power of STEM in meaningful ways.
That's amazing. That is amazing. All right, so now we're just wrapping everything up. We just want to give you some time to talk about your organization just a little bit, emphasize where we can find all of your books and we can find all your like amazing research or anything that you want to promote. We definitely want to give you time for that. We want to thank you again for coming, and
thank you.
We want to thank everybody for tuning in. I like to say, excuse me. We are so glad you were able to tune in with us and meet us back here next week for our amazing storytime guest. Go ahead. We'll let you promote any social media.
Yes. Well, you can find me right away just with my name, Artika Tyner, so ARTIKATYNER.com. And on my website, you can see all of my books listed there. You can also visit my blog for advice on teaching tools and ways to engage young people. In addition, we also founded a team of us, and I say we, Monica Habia and many of us came together to create an organization, a nonprofit called Planting People Growing Justice Leadership Institute, so PPGJLI. So ppgjli.org. You can also find additional resources about our efforts in promoting literacy and diversity in books. So if I think about what I can share with you, I would encourage you to visit all of our social media handles. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram and Twitter. That way you can learn about the work. We're also providing free online tools on YouTube. So we have additional book readings available. That way you can take some of these learning lessons and continue them. But I would say overall, if you are willing to be a part of the movement that we're building through Planting People Growing Justice, it starts right in your community. We've touched and worked with communities all over the world. It starts with things like the Scholar Network to be able to share information, come together for learning. It starts with organizing book drives. It starts with teaching a lesson to all the kids in your home and in the community. And even for this week, reach out to a teacher and say thank you for Teacher Appreciation Week, and salute our teachers and educators that are continuing to train and prepare our young people for the future. So our books are just a way to shine light on civil rights, on human rights history, and we are excited. The books are available on Amazon, and they're also available on our website. And last but not least, we have an online bookstore. So it's comprehensive. Not only does it have just all of our books, one of the things that we're also working on is increasing diversity in dolls to make sure that when young people pick up a doll, that it represents and reflects the beauty of our culture. So one of the partners that we have is through Nana Dolls. So you also have the opportunity not only to purchase a doll, but a doll that also teaches a history lesson. For instance, earlier I mentioned Yaa Asante Waa. There's actually a doll that represents Yaa Asante Waa, or even Queen Nanny, who was another revolutionary. So all of those pieces, I think, are coming together in some very meaningful ways. So if I can think of anything, is to ensure that you're supporting and buying local, supporting the small businesses, and supporting in your community to make sure education and literacy comes alive.
That's amazing. We want to thank you again, Dr. Tyner, for coming in and speaking to children and reading, showing us your presentation of your amazing trip to Ghana. And we would love to have you back later and presenting any of your other books.
Be happy to.
Yeah, and we just want to thank you. Thank you from the Scholar Network to our students. We want to thank the students, and we want to thank the parents for all tuning in and watching. And we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Santi.